For 25 years, I watched him walk past my window wearing that gold band on his finger. We never spoke. We never touched. But every morning at 7:15, our eyes would meet for exactly 3 seconds, and I knew. Then one October evening, he stood at my door, rain dripping from his coat, ring hand bare, and said the 2 words that changed everything. If this story moves you, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support means the world to me. The first time I saw Harrison was in March of 2003. I had just moved into a narrow brick row house on Cathedral Street in Baltimore, and I was standing at my second-floor window with a cup of coffee, watching the neighborhood wake up. He came around the corner from Monument Street carrying a leather messenger bag, his stride purposeful but unhurried, dark hair touched with gray at the temples, a navy coat that looked expensive but worn in, and on his left hand, catching the early light, a wedding ring. I was 31 years old. I had recently been promoted to senior data analyst at a healthcare technology firm downtown. I had a cat named Fig, a collection of vintage jazz records, and a growing certainty that I would spend my life alone, not because I wanted to, but because I had learned early that wanting something and having it were not the same thing. Harrison walked past my house every weekday morning at 7:15. I began to notice the pattern within the first week. He would glance up at my window just once, and our eyes would meet for the briefest moment before he continued on toward Charles Street. I never waved, he never smiled, but something passed between us in those 3 seconds, something quiet and unmistakable. I did not know his name then. I did not know where he was going or what his voice sounded like, but I knew he saw me the same way I saw him. Spring turned to summer. I started waking earlier just to make sure I was at the window by 7:15. I told myself it was habit. I told myself it meant nothing, but I bought new curtains for that window. I started wearing shirts I actually liked instead of the old t-shirts I used to sleep in. And every morning when his eyes found mine, my chest tightened in a way that felt both painful and necessary. One humid morning in July, he was carrying an umbrella even though the sky was clear. I watched him pause at the corner and look back toward my window. He lifted his hand just slightly as if to wave. I froze. My coffee cup hovered halfway to my lips. He lowered his hand and kept walking. I stood there for 10 minutes afterward, wondering if I had imagined it. The years passed. I dated occasionally, men I met through work or friends or apps that promised connection and delivered mostly disappointment. None of them lasted more than a few months. None of them knew about the man who walked past my window every morning at 7:15. I got a different job, this time as a senior database architect for a hospital network. I adopted a second cat, a gray tabby I named Monk. I turned 35, then 38, then 40. Harrison's hair went fully silver. He started wearing glasses sometimes. But he never stopped walking past my house, and he never stopped looking up. I learned his name by accident in 2012. I was at a community meeting about a proposed development on Reed Street, and I saw him across the room, sitting beside a woman with short auburn hair and a tired smile. The moderator called on him. "Harrison, you had a question?" His voice was deeper than I expected, measured, kind. I left before the meeting ended. I could not bear to see him walk out beside her, his hand perhaps resting on her back, the wedding ring glinting under the fluorescent lights. But the next morning, he was there at 7:15. And when he looked up at my window, I saw something in his face I had never seen before. Loneliness. I worked long hours. I traveled for conferences. I volunteered at a community archive on weekends, cataloging oral histories for a project on LGBTQ life in Baltimore. I had friends, good ones, who invited me to dinner parties and museum openings and weekend trips to the Eastern Shore. But every morning I stood at my window and waited for a man I could not have. In 2015, I saw him on a Saturday for the first time. He was walking north on Cathedral alone, carrying a bag from the farmer's market. He looked up at my window even though it was not 7:15, even though it was the weekend, even though everything about the moment was outside our routine. I stepped back from the glass, my heart pounding. After that, I started seeing him at other times, Sunday mornings, Wednesday evenings, always alone, always glancing up. I began to wonder if his marriage was ending. I began to wonder if he was waiting for something the same way I was, but the ring stayed on his finger. I turned 45. I got promoted again, this time to Director of Data Strategy. I bought a small cabin near Deep Creek Lake and spent weekends there, hiking and reading and trying not to think about the fact that I had spent 15 years in love with a stranger. Because that is what it was. Love, not infatuation, not fantasy. Love. I knew the way he walked. I knew the exact angle of his shoulders when he was tired. I knew that he favored his right leg slightly in the winter, as if an old injury bothered him in the cold. I knew that when he smiled, which was rare, it started in his eyes before it reached his mouth. I knew him, and I knew he knew me. One morning in 2019, he stopped directly in front of my house. He stood on the sidewalk, looking up, his hands in his coat pockets. I opened the window. We stared at each other for 30 seconds, maybe longer. Then he nodded once, as if confirming something to himself, and walked away. I called in sick to work that day. I sat on my couch with both cats curled beside me and cried for reasons I could not fully name. That winter, I saw him at the Walters Art Museum. I was there for a lecture on medieval manuscripts. He was standing in the sculpture court alone, studying a marble figure of Apollo. I could have walked over. I could have said hello. Instead, I left through the side exit and walked home in the freezing rain. The pandemic arrived in March of 2020. The city shut down. I started working from home full-time. And every morning at 7:15, Harrison walked past my house, even when the streets were empty, even when the governor ordered everyone to stay inside. He kept walking. I realized he was doing it for me, so I stayed at the window every single morning. We became each other's proof that the world was still turning. One morning in April, he was wearing a mask, but I could see his eyes crinkling at the corners. He was smiling. I smiled back, even though he could not see my face through the glass. By summer, the city began to reopen. I went back to the office part-time. Life resumed its fractured, cautious rhythm, but something had shifted. Harrison started walking slower. He started looking up at my window for longer than 3 seconds. And one morning in late August, I saw that his left hand was bare. No ring. I gripped the windowsill so hard my knuckles went white. He kept walking, but the next morning his hand was still bare, and the morning after that, I did not let myself hope, not yet. September came, the leaves started to turn. I took a week off work and drove to the cabin, needing space to think, needing to decide if I was brave enough to do what I had been too afraid to do for 17 years. When I came back to Baltimore, it was early October. The air smelled like wood smoke and rain. I stood at my window on a Tuesday morning waiting. 7:15 came and went. Harrison did not appear. I told myself he was sick. I told myself he was traveling. But Wednesday passed, and Thursday and Friday, and he did not come. On Saturday evening, I was sitting in my living room with a book I was not reading when someone knocked on my front door. I was not expecting anyone. I opened the door. Harrison stood on my steps, rain dripping from his gray coat, his hair plastered to his forehead. His eyes up close were hazel with flecks of gold. He was breathing hard as if he had been running. "I'm free," he said. I stepped back. My hand was still on the doorknob. "I'm sorry," Harrison said quickly. "I should have called first. I should have." He stopped. "I don't have your number. I don't even know your name." "Sawyer," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. "Sawyer Whitley. I'm Harrison Caldwell." He exhaled, a shaky sound. "I've been walking past your house for 17 years. I know. I wanted to knock on your door 1,000 times. Why didn't you? Because I was married." He looked down at his bare hand. "I was married and I loved her and I couldn't do that to her. I couldn't do that to you." I did not know what to say. My heart was beating so hard I felt dizzy. "She died," Harrison said quietly. 2 years ago, ovarian cancer, stage 4. We had 6 months from diagnosis to the end. "I'm so sorry." Her name was Linda. We were together for 32 years. "She was my best friend." His voice cracked. "And I spent the last decade of our marriage in love with someone else." The words hung in the wet October air between us. "She knew," Harrison continued. "Not about you specifically, but she knew. We talked about it once near the end. She told me she had always known I was holding something back. She said she understood." "Harrison!" I stayed away for 2 years because I needed to grieve her properly. I needed to make sure I was not running from my grief into something else. I needed to be certain. He looked up at me, rain streaming down his face. "I'm certain." I opened the door wider. "Come inside." He stepped into my hallway, dripping onto the hardwood floor. I handed him a towel from the closet, and he dried his face and hair with hands that trembled slightly. Fig appeared from the kitchen, meowing indignantly at the stranger. Monk followed, more cautious. "You have cats," Harrison said. "2 of them. I have a dog. A golden retriever named Copper." We stood there in the dim hallway, 2 men in our 50s who had spent 17 years looking at each other through a window. And I realized I had no idea what to do next. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked. "I would love some coffee." We sat at my kitchen table. The rain drummed against the windows. Harrison wrapped his hands around the mug I gave him, and I noticed the pale band of skin where his wedding ring used to be. "I teach at Hopkins," he said. "Medieval literature." That's where I was going every morning. My office is in Gilman Hall. I work in healthcare data, hospital systems, patient records, that kind of thing. "I know, I looked you up once." 5 years ago, I found your LinkedIn profile, he smiled faintly. "I felt like a stalker." "I looked you up too," I admitted. "After I heard your name at that community meeting, the Reed Street development, you were there with your wife?" "Yes," he stared into his coffee. "That was a hard year. She had just finished treatment for breast cancer. We thought she was in remission. I'm sorry I left." "I saw you," Harrison looked up. "I saw you come in and I saw you leave. I wanted to follow you out, but I couldn't." "I know." We talked for 3 hours. We talked about our childhoods, his in Annapolis and mine in Frederick. We talked about our jobs, our families, our favorite books and movies, and the places we had traveled. We did not talk about the 17 years we had spent watching each other. Not yet. When the rain finally stopped, Harrison stood to leave. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Yes. Tomorrow?" "Yes," he smiled, and I saw what I had only glimpsed through the window all those years. Warmth, hope, something that looked like joy. "I'll come by at noon," he said. "We can go to lunch. There's a place in Fells Point I think you'd like." "I'd like that." He hesitated at the door, and for a moment I thought he might kiss me. But instead he reached out and touched my hand just briefly, his fingers warm against mine. Then he was gone. I stood at the window and watched him walk down Cathedral Street, his stride lighter than I had ever seen it. We went to lunch the next day, and the day after that. Within a week, we were seeing each other every evening. Within a month, I had met Copper, and Harrison had spent the night at my house, the 2 of us talking until 3 in the morning before falling asleep on the couch, fully clothed. We did not rush. We had both waited too long to risk ruining it by moving too fast. But in early November, I kissed him for the first time. We were walking along the waterfront at sunset, and he was telling me about a conference he was planning to attend in Boston, and I just stopped and kissed him. He kissed me back. "I've wanted to do that since 2003, I said. "So have I." We were careful about how we moved through the world together. Harrison was not out at work, not officially, though he thought most of his colleagues had guessed over the years. I had been out since college, but I was private about my personal life. We did not hold hands in public. We did not kiss on the street, but we went to dinner together, to movies, to the farmer's market on Sundays. People assumed we were friends. We let them assume. In December, Harrison invited me to his house for the first time. It was a narrow brick row house on Reed Street, smaller than mine, but filled with books and art, and the kind of worn, comfortable furniture that spoke of decades of use. There were still photographs of Linda on the mantel. Harrison saw me looking at them. "I'm not taking them down," he said quietly. "I hope that's all right. Of course it is. She was part of my life for a long time. I don't want to pretend she wasn't. I would never ask you to." He kissed me then, slow and careful, and I felt the weight of everything he was carrying. Grief, guilt, love. I carried him as gently as I could. We spent Christmas together. I cooked dinner, something I almost never did, and Harrison brought wine and a box of ornaments Linda had collected over the years. "I thought we could use a few of them," he said. "If that's not too strange." It was not strange, it was beautiful. We decorated my small tree with glass birds and wooden stars, and a tiny silver bell that chimed softly when we hung it on the highest branch. On New Year's Eve, we stayed in. We watched the fireworks from my window, Copper sprawled at our feet and the cats curled on the back of the couch. At midnight, Harrison turned to me. "I love you," he said. "I have loved you for 17 years, and I will love you for the rest of my life." I love you too. We kissed as the city erupted in noise and light around us. And I thought about all the mornings I had stood at that window, waiting for a man I thought I could never have. In January, Harrison asked if I wanted to move in with him. Or I could move in with you, he said. I don't care where we live as long as we're together. I thought about it for a week. I thought about my house, my routines, the window where I had spent so many mornings watching him walk past. Let's stay where we are for now, I said. But let's talk about it again in a few months, he understood. We fell into a rhythm. I would stay at his place 3 or 4 nights a week. He would stay at mine the rest of the time. We walked copper together in the evenings. We cooked meals and read books and argued good-naturedly about politics and literature, and whether the Orioles would ever win another World Series. It was ordinary, it was perfect, but in March something shifted. Harrison came over one evening looking pale and distracted. He barely touched the dinner I made. What's wrong? I asked. I need to tell you something. My stomach dropped. Okay. Linda's sister called me today. She's been going through some of Linda's things and she found a letter. Linda wrote it a few months before she died. What did it say? Harrison pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. His hands were shaking. She wrote it to me, he said. But she wanted Janet to give it to me only after I had moved on, after I had found someone. He handed me the letter. I unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was neat, precise, the letters slightly shaky in places. My dear Harrison, it began. If you are reading this, it means you have found someone to love. I am so glad. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be with someone who sees you the way I saw you, even if I could not be everything you needed. I want you to know that I forgive you. I forgave you a long time ago. Love is complicated and we did the best we could. Please do not carry guilt into this new chapter of your life. Let yourself be happy. Let yourself be free. All my love, Linda. I set the letter down on the table. My eyes were blurry. Harrison was crying, silent tears streaking his face. She knew, he said. She always knew. She loved you. She did, he wiped his eyes. And I loved her, but I love you too, Sawyer. I love you in a way I never let myself love anyone before. I know. I don't want to hide anymore. I don't want to pretend we're just friends. I want people to know that you are the person I choose. I want to walk down the street holding your hand. I want to introduce you as my partner. Then let's do that. He looked at me, surprised. You're sure? I'm sure. I know it's not always safe. I know people will stare. Let them stare. He reached across the table and took my hand. Thank you. For what? For waiting. We started telling people in April. Harrison came out to his department chair, a woman in her 60s who had been at Hopkins for 30 years. She hugged him and said she was happy for him. I told my team at work. Most of them already knew I was gay, but I had never talked about my personal life in detail. They were supportive, asking questions about Harrison and teasing me gently about being in love. We told our families. Harrison's brother lived in Bethesda and had 3 grown children. He invited us to dinner and welcomed me warmly, though I could see the grief still lingering in his eyes when he looked at Harrison. My sister lived in Pennsylvania. She drove down to meet Harrison and spent the whole visit interrogating him about his intentions, his job, his hobbies, and whether he knew how to make me laugh. I'm working on it, Harrison said, grinning. Good, she said. He needs to laugh more. We went to Pride together in June. It was the first time either of us had ever attended. We walked through the streets of Baltimore holding hands, surrounded by thousands of people, and I felt something crack open inside me. Freedom. In July, we took a trip to the Eastern Shore. We rented a cottage in St. Michael's and spent a week walking along the water, eating crab cakes and talking about the future. I want to retire in a few years, Harrison said. I want to travel. I want to spend time with you without worrying about syllabi and grading and department meetings. Where do you want to go? Ireland, Scotland, Portugal, he smiled. Anywhere you want. I've always wanted to see Norway. Then we'll go to Norway. We talked about where we wanted to live. Whether we should sell both our houses and buy something new together, or whether one of us should move into the other's place. I like your house, I said, but I love my window, Harrison laughed. The window where you watched me walk past for 17 years. That window, we could keep both places, use yours as a study or rent it out. Or we could find something new. Something that belongs to both of us. I'd like that. In September, we found a house in Bolton Hill. It was a 3-story brick row house with tall windows, original woodwork, and a small garden in the back. The kitchen needed updating and the 3rd floor was unfinished, but it had good bones. "It's perfect," I said. Harrison stood in the empty living room, his hands in his pockets, looking around. "It is." We put offers on both our houses. Mine sold within 2 weeks. Harrison's took a little longer, but by November, we had closed on the new place and started moving in. It was strange, merging 2 lives that had been separate for so long. We argued about where to put the furniture, how to organize the kitchen, and whose books should go on which shelves. But we figured it out. Copper adjusted quickly, claiming the garden as his domain. Fig and Monk were more skeptical, but within a month, they had established their territories and seemed content. Harrison set up his study on the 3rd floor, filling it with his books and papers, and a large oak desk that had belonged to his father. I took over the 2nd floor den, installing the monitors and equipment I needed for work. We painted the bedroom a soft gray-blue. We hung Linda's photographs in the hallway, alongside pictures of my parents and my sister's family. We made it home. In December, Harrison and I were invited to a holiday party hosted by one of his colleagues. It was the first time we had attended a university event together as a couple. I was nervous. I had spent so much of my life being invisible, being careful, that the idea of walking into a room full of strangers and being seen felt terrifying. "We don't have to go," Harrison said. "I want to go. Are you sure?" "Yes." The party was in a large Victorian house in Homeland. The rooms were crowded, filled with professors and graduate students and their partners. Harrison introduced me to everyone, his hand resting lightly on my back. "This is Sawyer," he said over and over. "My partner." People smiled. They shook my hand. They asked about my work, my interests, how Harrison and I had met. I told them the truth. We had been neighbors. We had known each other for years before we started dating. No one asked for more details. No one pried. And slowly I began to relax. We stayed until nearly midnight, talking and laughing and drinking too much wine. On the drive home, Harrison reached over and took my hand. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For being brave. You were the one who knocked on my door, but you let me in." We spent Christmas at the new house. My sister and her family came down from Pennsylvania. Harrison's brother and his wife drove in from Bethesda. We cooked a chaotic, joyful meal together, the kitchen filled with noise and laughter and the smell of roasting turkey. After everyone left, Harrison and I sat in the living room with the lights off, watching the tree glow in the darkness. "This is the best Christmas I've ever had," he said. "Me too. I want to do this every year. I want to fill this house with people we love. I want to make new traditions." "So do I," he turned to me. "Will you marry me?" I stared at him. "What? I know we've only been together a year. I know it's fast. But I've loved you for 17 years, Sawyer. I don't need more time to know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you." "Harrison, you don't have to answer now. Think about it. Take as long as you need." "I don't need time." I took his hand. "Yes." He pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple silver band engraved with a pattern of interlocking leaves. "I bought it 3 months ago," he said. "I've been carrying it around, waiting for the right moment. This is the right moment." He slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. We were married in May, a small ceremony in the garden behind our house. My sister and her family were there. Harrison's brother and his family, a few close friends from work. Harrison's colleague, the department chair who had hugged him when he came out, officiated. She spoke about love and patience and the courage it takes to be honest about who you are. "These 2 men have waited a long time to be here," she said. "They have carried grief and hope and a quiet, enduring faith that love would find a way." And it has. We exchanged vows under a canopy of white flowers. I promised to love him in sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow for as long as we both lived. He promised the same. When we kissed, everyone cheered. Copper barked. Fig, who had somehow escaped from the house, wound around our ankles, meowing loudly. It was perfect. We honeymooned in Norway just as we had planned. We spent 2 weeks hiking through fjords, visiting small coastal villages, and marveling at the midnight sun. One evening, we stood on a rocky cliff overlooking the sea, the sky painted in shades of gold and pink. "I used to think I would spend my whole life alone," I said. "So did I. I'm glad I was wrong." Harrison put his arm around me. So am I. We returned to Baltimore in June. I went back to work. Harrison finished the spring semester and began preparing for a fall sabbatical he had been planning for years. We settled into our life together. We walked copper every evening. We hosted dinners for friends. We argued about small things like whose turn it was to take out the trash and big things like whether we should adopt another cat. We were happy. In August, I got a call from my supervisor. The hospital network was opening a new regional office in Richmond, and they wanted me to lead the data integration project. It was a significant promotion, but it would require relocating. I told Harrison that night. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I don't know. It's a great opportunity. But I don't want to leave Baltimore. I don't want to leave this house. We don't have to decide right now. Let's think about it." We spent the next 2 weeks talking it through. Harrison could teach remotely if he needed to. His sabbatical gave him flexibility. But he had spent his entire career at Hopkins, and I knew how much the university meant to him. "I don't want you to give that up for me," I said, "and I don't want you to give up this job for me. So what do? We figure it out together." In the end, I turned down the promotion. It was not an easy decision, but it was the right one. I loved my work, but I loved my life with Harrison more. My supervisor understood. She offered me a different role, one that would allow me to work remotely 3 days a week and come into the Baltimore office the other 2 days. I accepted. Harrison's sabbatical began in September. He spent his days writing a book he had been planning for years, a study of medieval travel narratives. I would come home from the office and find him in his study, surrounded by books, his reading glasses perched on his nose. "How's the book coming?" I would ask. "Slowly." "But it's coming." We took long weekends in the mountains. We visited my sister in Pennsylvania and Harrison's brother in Bethesda. We went to the theater, to concerts, to art exhibits. We lived. One Saturday in October, exactly 2 years after Harrison had knocked on my door, we walked down Cathedral Street together. We stopped in front of my old house, which had been repainted a cheerful yellow by the new owners. "I used to stand at that window every morning," I said. "I know. I used to think it was the only way I would ever be close to you." Harrison took my hand. "And now I get to wake up next to you every day." He kissed me there on the sidewalk in full view of anyone who might be watching. "I love you," he said. "I love you too." We walked home together, hand in hand, the October light golden and warm around us. That evening we sat in the garden with copper at our feet. The air smelled like wood smoke and fallen leaves. The city hummed in the distance, alive and electric. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked. "The years we lost." Harrison thought for a long time before answering. "No," he said finally. "I wish things had been different. I wish we could have had more time. But I don't regret the life I lived with Linda. And I don't regret waiting until I was free to come to you. I don't regret waiting either, even though it was hard, especially because it was hard." I leaned my head on his shoulder. "It made this mean more." We sat in silence, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. I thought about the morning I had first seen him, 20 years ago now, walking past my window with a messenger bag and a wedding ring. I thought about all the mornings that had followed, the accumulation of glances and unspoken words and quiet longing. I thought about the evening he had knocked on my door, rain-soaked and barehanded, and told me he was free. And I thought about everything that had come after, the conversations, the laughter, the grief and the joy and the slow